we have an interesting example of our own recklessness that I was referring to over at Dropsite. If you can put up this element here. Our correspondent over in Israel, Yaniv Kogan, writes this piece. Blinken approved policy to bomb aid trucks, Israeli cabinet members suggest.
Wow.
And that might sound crazy. Go read the story. I'll put the link in the description down below. What Yaniv identified here is that at October 16th and 17th, into the early morning hours of the 17th, Secretary of State Blinken goes to Israel. So this is 10 days after the attack, and humanitarian aid has been cut off to Gaza. The first thing that Netanyahu says to him is that, look, I can't actually lift this siege. I've got people in my cabinet who don't want a bottle of aspirin getting into Gaza. And he says, I will negotiate this with Biden, not with you. And Blinken says, Biden's not getting on a plane and coming to visit here unless you change this policy.
Okay.
And so Blinken thinks that bluster is going to move Netanyahu. He meets him 6 hours later. Netanyahu still hasn't moved. So what Yanni reports here, Blinken sits down with the security cabinet of Israel, and they hash out a humanitarian aid policy. And the policy that they finally agreed to is that, okay, we will let in some aid trucks, not through Israel. We'll let them come in through Egypt. Egypt has to basically let us monitor everything that's going in. And if we believe that there is any Hamas involvement with any of these aid convoys, we are allowed to strike those convoys. And Blinken then signs off on those. And one of the key pieces of evidence of this, the first draft was published in English, which is, the kind of a giveaway is going back and forth between Blinken. And the word that they use to thwart, they say we will thwart it if it's connected to Hamas. We will thwart the convoy, is the same Hebrew word, Yanni points out, that they often use to describe assassinations. So thwart they're clear about what's going on here. The State Department's spokesperson, Matthew Miller, was asked by Saeed Erekat yesterday about this report at the State Department briefing. Let's take a listen to that.
Let me ask you about a report in Dropsite. And it says that Secretary Blinken approved a policy to bomb aid trucks. That's what an Israeli cabinet member said. Are you aware of this report, and do you have any comment on it?
I am aware of the report, and I'm glad you asked me about it. Look, the suggestion that we in any way signed off on bombing humanitarian convoys is absurd. It's just not true. Of course, Israel has the right to target Hamas militants. That has always been the case. And so look, if you had a situation where Hamas commandeered a convoy and Hamas militants were operating a convoy, of course Israel would have the right to strike those militants. That's not been the situation that we've seen over the past year, except in some very limited circumstances. There have been a few reports here and there of Hamas commandeering convoys, in most cases returned quickly to the humanitarian organizations. It has not been, there's not been any widespread evidence that we have seen of Hamas actually taking convoys and commandeering them, which is, I think, the scenario, or the proposition of this scenario presumes. So the strikes that Israel has conducted on humanitarian convoys have been times when they have had failures in their deconfliction processes, where they have had intelligence failures, and when they've just made basic mistakes. And the thing that we have made clear about those is that those mistakes are unacceptable, and that humanitarian workers need to be protected, and humanitarian aid needs to be protected. So the idea that anyone at this department signed off on bombing humanitarian convoys is just absolutely ridiculous.
So if you notice there, Saagar, he starts by calling the report absurd, but then throughout the answer, he basically confirms the report that if Israel believes that Hamas is involved with these convoys, then of course they have the right to strike it. That rationale is, of course, the one that the IDF has used each time it has struck a convoy. If you think back to the World Central Kitchen attack that killed all those aid workers, they said, well, we thought that there were a couple Hamas militants at some point before it went into the warehouse, and we thought maybe they were still there. Every attack on an aid convoy has used this very rationale. The other policy option available is, you know what, don't attack humanitarian aid convoys, let's just have that as our policy. Like that's an available policy, and still to this day, not one that the U.S. has insisted on.
I mean, the report itself is, I actually encourage people to go read it. But on the response from Matt Miller, what did you make then of his categorical denial? Or was there room for this within his framework? What did you think of that?
So if you're used to parsing these responses, absurd is a word that they use that's not a categorical denial.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. It's absurd, but it could be true.
Doesn't actually mean it's not true.
That's good.
And then he later says, of course, if Hamas has commandeered an aid convoy, then Israel has a right to strike that. That's what we reported.
Got it.
And so they're confirming that that is the policy. Because like I said, the alternative policy is we don't care who is driving the aid convoy. You don't strike an aid convoy. You deal, if something happens to an aid convoy, you deal with that later in other ways. The Flower massacre, where 100+ people or so were slaughtered at this intersection, there was a Hamas security official who was in charge of the security around that delivery of the flour. Like, this is often who aid organizations are communicating with, the Hamas police officials. Hamas is the de facto government. So you're going to find Hamas. If you're Israel, you have been saying for years that UNRWA is a front for Hamas. So a low-level or mid-level operative who is behind the button on the drone, UNRWA? Well, we already believe that they're a front for Hamas and thoroughly infiltrated and a terrorist organization that ought to be banned. There's UNRWA. And you see one guy with a gun, like, all right, well, we're going to hit this aid convoy. It also raises the question, who do they want to do security for these aid convoys? Is Blackwater available for business to start shepherding aid convoys through Gaza? Like, what are they talking about? So the result is that aid convoys get struck. And the result of an aid convoy getting struck is not just that particular flour or water or medicine doesn't get delivered, but then the aid organization itself not only has lost personnel, but usually stops for an extended period of time delivering aid.
What do you make of this in the context of previous stuff you guys have reported about Blinken and his overruling of things within the department?
That he's effectively acted as basically an attorney for Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, taking their harshest ideological positions and massaging them into something that's acceptable from a U.S. perspective. And I think that if you delved into his heart of hearts or something, what he would be saying is, look, it was either this or abject starvation, because they were telling me that not a single aspirin was going to get in. And I got 50 trucks in, and then the next day there were 60 trucks in. And yes, the result was that some convoys got struck, and that's unfortunate, but the alternative was much worse. So I think that's what they would argue. But on the other hand, it's the greatest superpower in the history of the world that is just getting, walked around by a client state.
That's what underscores to me is we go through all this bureaucratic BS to approve all of this Israeli violation of U.S. law, and then you see the same machine kick in to justify anything Ukraine, wants to do. And it's when you put those two things together, you're like, what are we doing here?
These are choices.
These are explicit choices. These are if anything, it seems to me like Blinken is such a powerful force because Biden is so cooked and so irrelevant that Blinken does run a lot of U.S. foreign policy with respect to these discrete choices. When Biden can coherently be like, just give them whatever they want or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's the one actually mechanically executing all of this.
There was a new Axios report this morning. I love new Axios reports.
Yes, absolutely.
4 sources say that Biden is increasingly frustrated and he doesn't trust.
Yeah.
He doesn't trust that the Israelis are honest brokers when it comes to their talks with him. It's like,
okay, all right, got it. Yeah, very, very useful. Any other plans on the State Department? If you were, when's the next briefing?
Today. Okay. I'll be at it. I was at this one, and I got dissed on the follow-up.
What do you want to ask him today?
I don't know. Is it, people should tell me what they want to ask. One thing I have been, I've been wanting to ask is, what happened to the American concern for civilian casualties when Israel bombed this killed a top Hamas commander in 2002? This is it was 6 months after 9/11.
Oh, you're talking about the Bush administration. I remember this. Yeah.
6 months after 9/11, Islamophobia and fear of terrorists is ripping through the American body politic. They take out a top Hamas commander and kill like 8 civilians or so in that strike. The Bush administration loses it on them. Like, this is an unacceptable civilian death toll. Now, you can take out 200 to 300 civilians in a single strike aimed at a top Hezbollah commander. And the answer from the State Department is, well, Hezbollah shouldn't be near all of these civilians.
Right.
Not even a reference in a Lloyd Austin statement or a Blinken statement or a Biden statement or a Harris statement. Not even a line that says that this civilian death toll is unacceptable. What happened? So I'm curious from their perspective, what happened in the 20 years since then to make it so that we're cool with that?
You should ask him that. Yeah. I'd like to see that. I remember I've brought that up before about the Bush administration, how in 2002, even Ari Fleischer, who actually, that's the ironic part. Fleischer said that in 2002, but now he's on Fox News being like, actually, Israel is the most moral army in the history of the world. I'm like, wait, but I know nothing matters, but that's, you said that. Yeah. He'd be like, well, that was President Bush, not me. Yeah, I'm sure
the compassionate conservative.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.